Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Laura, this is Culture Nonsense, and today I'm coming back with another review of The Dropout. I'm going to try to get through episodes 2 and 3, so hopefully the video is not too long, but I wanted to do these two together because I'm a little bit behind. There's already episode 4 out, so I'll get that done next week, hopefully before episode 5 comes out. And once again, I'm sorry I can't do clips. I really tried. I tried 5 different screen recorders, and every single thing I did, the recording ended up just being a black box. So it looks like Hulu has got that locked down real tight. If anyone does know a way that I could do it and also do this legally free, because there were also options where you could, download the videos offline, and I didn't want to do that because it's not legal. Yeah, if anyone's got any tips that could work, please let me know in the comments below. The other issue is that there's been a lot of music in these episodes, so even if by some miracle I were able to get the video, there's been a lot of problems with the audio because I know there are a lot of scenes where there's a pretty famous copyrighted song playing underneath, so I also would not be able to use that audio. Anyway, episode 2 picks back up in 2006. We're a couple years ahead of where episode 1 left off. Theranos has been around for a couple years now, even though they're kind of flailing as the small business or small, enterprise, whatever they are. And it is demo day. So we get a couple introductions of different scientists who are going to be in the lab who will be following, and they all, rush back to work to see if they can get a demo working for, I think it's called at this point like the RDX microfluidics analyzer or something. They didn't have the Edison device yet. This box is still working with microfluidic technology, and they have these little cartridges where they put a drop of blood on there. And this was what Theranos started off as, and we'll see that in episode 3, this approach changes when they just can't get it to work. So of course the demo does not work. It seems like it's going to, and then it just fails. And one of the problems is that Theranos can't really continue because they're just running out of money. Up until this point, I think Elizabeth had secured something like $6 million, which is pretty impressive, but it takes a lot of money to run a lab. I think they said every cartridge is something like $200, so it's super expensive, not to mention everyone who's working there needs to get paid. So she's going to all these different venture capitalist firms, and she just gets soundly rejected by all of them. When she's meeting with these venture capitalists, I think in the scene you can tell there's a little bit of a tone of, them not taking her seriously, partially because there's a woman, there's one of them who makes, sexually suggestive comments. But a lot of them do ask very relevant questions like, what is your background in this technology? Do you have any experience? How are you doing this advanced, chemical engineering with essentially a high school degree? And of course, Elizabeth doesn't really have good answers for any of that because she, of course, does not have experience. She is pretty in way over her head, and although she has this great idea, these established firms are not going to give anything to her, especially because she doesn't have a prototype. And so she's in one of those situations where she can't get funding because she doesn't have a prototype, but she can't get to the stage of getting a prototype because she doesn't have funding. So she's essentially in an area with nowhere to go. The other difficult thing about this is that it's not like she could just, put things on the back burner and try for a couple more years to get to that place. You need money to be able to do that. If her company shuts down, it pretty much is not going to be able to get back on its feet. You need funding, and then she'd be right back in the situation where they don't want to give her anything because she has nothing to show for where this technology could go. A lot of the issues that Elizabeth is running into in these episodes 2 and 3 show that she's essentially taking a Machiavellian ends justify the means approach to cutting corners and eventually doing downright unethical things. I guess in her mind, we have to do this to keep the business going because if the business stops, it is a net loss for the world. Even if I'm doing all these little acts that are shady, unethical, ill-advised, bad for people, the net positive of Theranos in the world is going to vastly overshadow any of these little things that I'm doing. So I have to do whatever it takes to get this company off the ground because I have to. So she does end up getting a meeting with Don Lucas due to some of her old Stanford connections. And when she gets there, he doesn't want to see her. And then later on, the next day, I believe, he just shows up at Theranos. And of course, no one is ready for him. The prototype's not working. And it is a pretty comedic scene with everyone running around. And there are all these blood vials and someone makes a mistake and blood vials get, squished all over someone's shirt. And so he's running down the hallway and then Elizabeth rounds the corner and Don Lucas is right behind her. And then they look at each other with this panic and he's got blood all over his shirt. And so behind the scenes, the lab is just an absolute mess. And it's very clear they're not ready for whatever Don Lucas wants. Elizabeth, I think in this instance, does take a good approach and says, listen, we're not ready to show you the demo because truthfully, they're not. But she does say, she gives this kind of rousing speech saying that, there are only 2 pharma companies that are controlling everything. Their tech is ancient. They're dinosaurs. We're here to shake things up. He's wearing a cowboy hat. So she's like, we're cowboys, we've got to take things into our own hand and make all these tough choices and take risks, and don't you want to be a part of that? It is a pretty convincing speech, and she does actually mention, can you imagine how important this would be if something like this were on the battlefield? And this is the first time in the series that we've heard her make this battlefield claim, which will be important down the road. I really do wonder if she had this, kernel of an idea in her head before, or if she just kind of pulled it out of her ass while talking to Don Lucas in this moment, and then, went back to it later. So because of this interest Don Lucas has with her now, he sets up a meeting with Larry Ellison, and there's a scene where Elizabeth is getting ready for this meeting with Sunny, and he tells her to not talk about saving the world, not using her giddy voice, not saying awesome, and he says, you're beautiful, but you don't want them to think you're too beautiful because they won't take you seriously, and he buttons up an extra button on her shirt, and it's just, I think, a little bit of the foreshadowing of what comes to light in the trial where Elizabeth says Sunny is very controlling. However, you could also take it the opposite way of him saying, look, you're a young woman going into a very sexist business world and you need to do these things to succeed for them to take you seriously. It might not be right or fair, but it's what you have to do to play ball with these men. It's also funny that Elizabeth is going to have dinner with Sunny and her parents. They're going to meet him for the first time, and she describes him as in his mid-30s. And I love this just casual lie there because this is taking place in 2006, and Sunny's birthday is in June, so he was either definitely 40 or 41 while this was happening. So that's just, again, straight lie. But yeah, if I were, 22, my parents wouldn't want me dating a 40 or 41-year-old man. So the meeting with Larry Ellison on the boat seems to go pretty well. He tells her to, get the effing money and pretty much just hustle and do whatever you can. And I think this ethos is another thing that steers Elizabeth towards all of those unethical actions and the, essentially fake it till you make it approach. Now, while she is on this boat, she gets a call from her parents and her father is in the hospital. He had had some previous health complications. And when she shows up to the hospital, her dad says, "Why are you here? Why did you leave the boat? You need to go back to work." I really hated this interaction because I just don't understand the hustle culture if it is a detriment to the personal relationships in your lives. I guess it just goes to show that we all value different things. But to me, I don't understand. I guess you could say, yeah, the idea of Theranos is bigger and it supersedes those things, and it's so that the world can be a better place for everyone and you have to make sacrifices. But also, I don't know. I think family is important. I think taking breaks are important. And speaking of taking breaks, Elizabeth goes back to the office and breaks up a birthday party like a tyrant and tells Edmund Koo, one of the scientists, that everyone is going to need to start working round the clock, 24-hour shifts. And that this is just insanity. On the boat, she had secured a demo with Novartis that Larry Ellison set up, but they're just not ready for it. They're not ready, and so she wants everyone to work like crazy maniacs to get there. and she says people are expendable. Her scientist is talking to her about how this is unreasonable, people have families, they're going to burn out, and her response is basically just, I can replace them. If they burn out, I can get someone new in here, but this is more important. Yeah, so this is the time of the series where Theranos does not sound like a fun place to work, and it just gets worse from here. And again, I can understand where Elizabeth is coming from, because like I said, if this doesn't go well, Theranos is basically done. She's lost all her college tuition money, she has nowhere to go. It's not like she can really continue on with this idea, because you need money, you need partners, you need other people in this to keep you going. However, the way she starts to treat people is just terrible. So eventually we do see a scene where Rakesh and Edmund do get a positive result, or I guess they get a negative result. They don't have sepsis. That's the test they're running. The machine works. So the demo worked. And so they're flying off to Switzerland to have this Novartis conference. And the night before, the demo is not working. They're frantically trying everything they can think to get it to work, and it's just not happening. So after hours and hours of trial and error, Elizabeth eventually comes to the idea that they can fake the demo. Because they had this one test that worked, that reading is essentially saved in the machine. So what they're going to do is pretend like they're having the demo, and then that saved reading will be bounced back, and it'll show that it worked, when really the machine is just going to show the reading from the previous test, not run a whole new test, because it's just not able to do that. The way that this is brought about is essentially, it did happen before, it did work, everyone saw it, so I don't know why it's failing now, but we know that the technology works, so we're just gonna fake this demo and then get back to the office and see if we can fix it. Again, basically, fake it till you make it. So that is where this episode ends, with the demo being faked, and it is truly the first turn Elizabeth takes towards outright lying and misrepresenting her company. I lied. That's not where the episode ends. I forgot. They have a Christmas party afterwards, and everyone is celebrating because after the successful demo, they secure like $165 million. So they're going to be able to continue. However, there are some people at the company who have serious reservations about the fact that they faked the demo. Now, at the Christmas party, there is a scene where Elizabeth is drinking way too much, and her assistant there calls Sunny and, asks him to come pick her up, and Elizabeth fires her assistant for this. And then Sunny's just chastising her and being very mean and saying, you have to be better than them. These people aren't respecting you. And then Elizabeth fesses up to him and says, I'm not better. We faked the demo. Now, there's one line in here that I feel very odd about, because Amanda Seyfried, as Elizabeth, says, I don't feel things the way other people feel things. And I don't know if this is meant for us to believe that, I don't know, Elizabeth is on the spectrum maybe, has some type of antisocial personality disorder, has something that's just not letting her connect or understand the way that neurotypical people do. I wasn't exactly sure what that was meant to convey. I don't know if it was supposed to be, assigned to the audience to kind of give her more of a pass because she doesn't understand how other people feel things. It's just very odd. And as far as I know, we haven't heard anything from Elizabeth herself about any type of diagnosis that would make this statement make more sense. If any of you guys have any idea or theories as to what that comment might have meant, let me know in the comments below. Anyway, on to episode 3. And so this is the one where things really take a turn. It's a shit show. So we open up in 2007 now, and we have the iPhone launch. And of course, because Elizabeth is obsessed with Steve Jobs, she's, one of the first people in line to get the iPhone. And we also get a scene of Sunny being randomly detained at an airport, which I thought was an interesting scene to show. They definitely didn't need to. I think it added to some of the frustrations he had later in that episode. But as someone who has traveled with friends who have Middle Eastern names, I can definitely say that they're also randomly selected at every single airport they step foot in. So definitely something realistic there that was depicted. So going back to Apple and the iPhone and Elizabeth's obsession with this, she meets with Anna Areola, who was one of the designers for the iPhone, or like the lead designer for the iPhone. So she is really interested in Anna coming on board to work at Theranos. However, there's a catch, because to leave Apple, Anna would have to give up about 15,000 shares, which she says, that's kind of like her retirement money. And today, 15,000 shares of Apple stock it's worth, a little over $2.4 million. So it stinks that she lost that. She thought she was maybe jumping ship to Theranos, to a company that would also be profitable in the long run, but that just wasn't the case. And so this woman, Anna, ended up losing a lot of money, all because she believed in Elizabeth. There is also a scene where Elizabeth's mom, Noelle, figures out, or is told by Richard Fuse's wife, Lorraine, that Richard has filed a patent that could be a problem for Theranos down the line. Essentially, what he did here, which, yes, I think is a bit petty, but, in the long run, did Elizabeth deserve it? Probably yes. He was looking into her devices or technology that she was doing, and he found something that seemed like it would be integral to whatever technology they were doing, and he patented that one piece. So essentially, Elizabeth's company is going to get to a point where they can't move forward actually doing this technology without buying the patent off of Richard, because if they were to move forward, he could say, oh, I patented that one thing that you're using, so I'm going to sue you now. Something pretty similar happened, I think, this happens all the time, but that the CAPTCHA thing where you have to click different images of a motorcycle or something. I believe someone patented something in there, and then every single website that was using that process had to pay them because they said, oh, you're infringing on my patent. So yes, this was definitely kind of a patent troll move, but in this instance, I'm okay with it because it was against Elizabeth Holmes. So yeah, the whole family gets real mad at Richard, which, once again, if you haven't seen my past videos, is one of my old clients. So because Theranos has now secured all of this funding, there's a scene at a construction site where they're building their new offices, or renovating their new offices. They're eventually going to be able to move out of their East Palo Alto, bad neighborhood offices. And this scene is important because while there's a lot of people from the board, and Avi Tevanian is one of them, and he also came over from Apple, and he's bringing up serious issues to Elizabeth, and she's trying to give him the brush off. He's essentially asking about all of these contracts that weren't completed and talking about, Theranos' revenue. They did not end up getting a completed contract with Novartis, and he's saying that, well, look, your revenue here, your estimated revenue, is based on having these contracts and agreements with these companies. So the fact that this one fell through means that your revenue projections are completely off. We also know that this is going to be an issue years down the road, because as everything that came out in the trial and the testimony from Denise Yam, the comptroller at Theranos, they did this all the time, where they used basically theoretical things to make real revenue projections, which, is not how things work. And so that was very disingenuous to investors when they said, this is our projected revenue, and the projections were sky high, and then the actuality was real low. And you can't really make the argument that, oh, well, you never know what's going to happen, it's an investment, because they were misrepresenting the money they already had or were going to have from contracts. So to get around this, Elizabeth says, oh, well, the one with Novartis fell through, but we're also doing this other one with Pfizer, so it's essentially going to make up for it. However, Avi is not done pushing back, and he says that, there's not been a successful validation study with actual patients, and Elizabeth says that's a formality, and then he responds that, validating that the machine works is a formality. It just, again, goes to show that Elizabeth is not looking at these granular details. She honestly, I don't want to say she doesn't care, but she just is of the mindset of, I've got to push through to these bigger and better things. Anything that is small at this stage, we're just going to bulldoze past it, and eventually it'll all be okay. You've got to start wondering at this point, are her motivations changing? She says she still really wants to help people, but she's doing a lot of stuff that could eventually be detrimental to people. Moving forward with technology that's not working is not going to help people. She's really got blinders on, and it's at this point that there's a lot of speculation as to, well, was she doing it just because she wanted fame and money, or was she really so single-minded she was just blinded to all of these difficulties? Not necessarily blinded because people are bringing them up, but just being willfully ignorant, I guess. At this point, things kind of continue to escalate and unravel at Theranos. Anna keeps hounding Elizabeth about the fact that she doesn't even have dimensions for a design prototype, and she's confused as to how they're going to go forward with a trial with Pfizer if she hasn't even been given dimensions for the prototype, so how are they going to use it? It's just all a mess. Elizabeth is also getting paranoid because Anna and Avi were talking to each other, and so now she's worried about who's sharing information in the company, and this is when things start to get siloed. Everyone can only stick to their own department. You don't have access to certain places if you're not working with that specific stuff. There's security brought in, and everyone is just starting to get really freaked out. She has her assistant try to friend everyone on Facebook to find out what they're talking about. There's spyware installed on all their computers. The work environment is just really becoming like a police state where, anyone could snitch on you for saying something bad about the dear leader. At this point, Sonny also just shows up to the office saying he's a consultant and just looks around without Elizabeth's knowledge. Because Avi wasn't getting the response he wanted from Elizabeth, he goes straight up to big old Don Lucas and basically brings him all the data and says, look, these contracts aren't signed. She's lying to you. He tells Avi to resign, which, great. And then we get a scene at the Nashville oncology trial, which there were actual oncology trials with Pfizer. So don't know if this is exactly how it went down, but essentially, Elizabeth is testing this device that doesn't work on cancer patients, and it's just a whole bundle of just ethical nightmares. Because of this kind of crisis of conscience, Edmund Koo, one of the engineers, decides to leave, and then we also got the name drop of the Edison for the first time. While everything is going on at work, Elizabeth hires some new people to work on a redesign. She decides to just scrap the old one completely. And Ian Gibbons, who's played by Stephen Fry, a treasure, talks about how this new technology is just miniaturizing a process that already exists. She's just kind of taking a robot arm and repurposing it. So yeah, she's essentially just completely redesigning everything and not even telling investors about it. So they've invested in a prototype and idea that now is completely scrapped. So the other problem is that this new design or technology essentially mimics what traditional analyzers do, but they're just doing it on a smaller scale. So the new idea is pretty much destined to fail from the start because, according to many experts, Theranos is using the same reagents and chemical processes of traditional analyzers, but they're doing it with less blood and shoddy equipment, so it's just not going to work the same way. There's a reason why traditional analyzers are the size that they are. We also get Elizabeth practicing her deep voice in this episode, and after it's really intense and a little creepy, there is actually some comedic effect with it later because she answers a phone call using this deep voice and they're like, "Do you have a cold?" So the show's conceit is definitely that Elizabeth is putting on this voice and she didn't have it the whole time. I mean, seriously, who talks like this just normally in life? I don't understand how they could think that this is just her normal voice all the time. More people decide to leave Theranos about the unethical trial with cancer patients, including Anna Areola and the entire design team. They just are out. And while they quit, they handed off a book to Elizabeth's assistant to give to her that's called the no asshole rule book because apparently she's just a terrible boss. And I don't know if this happened all at the same time, but for the sake of this TV show, while Elizabeth is finding out this news about the design team, Don Lucas shows up in that exact instance and tells her that He looked at all the contracts. He realizes that none of them are complete. Her revenue projections are wrong, and he's going to hold a vote of no confidence, and they want to boot her as CEO. Elizabeth, of course, doesn't want this, so she tries to start spinning the narrative to him, and he's just not going to hear it. There's an interesting scene here where at first I was wondering why it's there, but it becomes evident almost immediately afterwards. In kind of a fit of rage, Elizabeth breaks her iPhone and then goes to the Genius Bar to get it to work again. And so while she's there, she meets with this woman and is just so rude to her. And again, just shows that Elizabeth does not seem to have normal social skills. She asks this woman, what her dream was as a child. And the woman says, I don't know, I didn't really have one. So Elizabeth talks about how great that must be. And then the woman says, oh, well, it's not actually, it's a little scary. And then Elizabeth says, it's great because nothing you do will matter because you don't care. You have no ambition. You're just a person. It's so rude. I mean, you can tell in this interaction that Elizabeth's idea of herself is just so larger than life. She's got such an inflated sense of herself because she's got this purpose and this drive to do something, and everyone else who isn't on that level is just beneath her. And honestly, if you see other people like that, it makes sense as why, she's treating them as like expendable all the time. So because of this interaction, the woman is so flustered that she accidentally deletes all the data from Elizabeth's phone, and she starts crying and saying that she's sorry and she did everything right, but she did it too quickly. And Elizabeth essentially just copies everything that this crying woman is saying and says it at the board meeting. And so you see her, this young woman, in this table with all of these middle-aged to older men, I think pretty much mostly white men, and she just breaks down and starts fake crying to basically get their sympathy. The charges against her, so to speak, are that she's, misrepresented the revenue stream, she's unable to manage research and design, she's missed deadlines again and again, which means they lost contracts, specifically with Pfizer, and the whole design team is resigned, and Richard Fuse has filed a competing patent against her. So she's got this whole roster of things she's done wrong, and she just basically plays the sympathy card. She manipulates the fact that she's this young woman who they see as vulnerable and not ready, and she plays that to her advantage and, plays them like a fiddle. They were going to replace her with someone, and she offers up an alternative right away. She says, okay, you're right. I'm not ready. I did this too fast, and I'm so, so sorry. And, she's got this real teary voice going on. And then as soon as she starts offering up her second idea, it just kind of, goes away. So she says, what if I bring on an old friend who's going to invest $20 million into the company, and he will come on as COO to basically keep me honest, help me along the way. They go for this plan, and yes, of course, that friend is Sunny. And it's kind of funny because as soon as Elizabeth goes home after this, Sunny tries to break up with her. And she says, no, I want you to come on to the business. So, he agrees. I think he'd felt, insecure about her trying to push him out of her life or something. So he's actually happy with the fact that he's going to be able to be involved in Theranos, even though he has to give up $20 million to do it. At this point, another one of the original employees, Rakesh, also quits, and we see poor, sweet Ian Gibbons wandering around the new offices, just looking a little stunned at everything. And Richard Fuse gets sued, so he's served papers. I am really interested in where that storyline goes because, like I said before, I highly doubt they would bring my old boss into it, but he was deposed while all of this went on. So I just, like I said, want to see where it goes because I know people who were personally involved in that aspect of the story. And this episode closes out with pretty much all of the new changes at Theranos and a slow upward panning shot of Elizabeth in her, going to be iconic black pantsuit, I don't know, her black turtleneck, basically all black. And Sunny hands her a green juice. And I forgot earlier in the episode, they were kind of having problems and they have a fight and he kind of throws his green juice and he kind of seems violent. And yeah, that's also probably a little bit of foreboding and foreshadowing of what's to come. Elizabeth described Sonny as abusive, so we've definitely gotten a lot of hints along the way that is in him and could show up further on. So yeah, she didn't want the green juice at first, and now she's drinking it. While I edit this, I'm going to see what I can do, if there's any way I can find some type of clip or something. If not, I'm going to try to include a lot of pictures, so I am so sorry, but Hulu seems to have stuff locked down real tight. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you watching the show as well? What do you think? Do you like it? I haven't talked too much about whether or not I'm enjoying the show so far, and I would say that I am. I'm finding everything pretty interesting, and it's fun as someone who has followed the trial and all of these early stories about Theranos. There are a lot of little Easter eggs in there. If you would like to be alerted to more of these videos in the future, feel free to subscribe to the channel, and hope you all have a great day. See you in my next video. Bye!